Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 405 of the Running Rogue podcast. This is your host, Chris McClung, joined by co-host James Dodds. Excited to be back with you, recording today on Global Running Day.
Oh, yeah.
We won't be releasing on Global Running Day, but this is June 3rd, Global Running Day, which I'm not sure where that came from or who invented it, but hey, anything that supports and promotes the sport we're happy with. So happy Global Running Day, James.
Yeah. Happy Global Running Day to you. And I think ever since it was started, because I may have been late to the party, I think I've coached every one of them because I coach on Wednesday night. So
yeah,
I've always been able to check the box, even if I didn't intentionally check it.
Me too. Yeah. With the Wednesday morning group myself, we get the kickoff to celebrate the morning shift of Global Running Day. But I do think it is a fairly new phenomenon. You know, this was named, I don't know, less than 10 years ago, I want to say, because it hasn't always been a thing. For a while, they were promoting Global Running Month or National Running Month, I think it was, which was in May. And then Global Running Day was invented in the first Wednesday in June. And for a minute, I'm like, why did we have that disconnect? Like, can we just sync it up a little bit better? But it seems like National Running Month has kind of fallen away, and now Global Running Day in June gets all the love. So
I guess people wanted to, I feel like this one popped up about the same time I was getting emails of like, there's a National Taco Day or now I'm making them up, but like T-shirt day where you get these random ones kind of thrown in, but I'll keep the running one. Yeah. But yeah, there are some out there and I feel like it popped up somewhere in that time.
Yes.
And there's got to be different people behind them because the day person didn't talk to the month person.
They got out of sync. But hey, again, anything that supports the sport, we're happy with. Today's topic is a very important one. We're kind of continuing our step through the various types of days that you have in your running routine. And this day probably is underrated in its impact in how you build your overall routine. We're going to be talking about the recovery run. I think the title of the chapter is The Art of the Recovery Run, because it is something that is requires art and learning. And there's science behind it and there's a lot of good reasons why we do it, but learning to master the recovery run, I think, is a good combination of the art and science of the sport. So we're going to talk about the why, the when, the where, and the how of the recovery run. Before we jump in on that, where does your mind go when you think of recovery?
It actually starts, I don't know if this is helpful in the way of dialogue and conversation, but it actually starts with the word stress and bringing up that idea of our medium long run or our three legs of the stool that we talked about in the most previous recording. It starts there because and I'm not promoting stress in the way of like distress. I remember when the 4-hour work week came out in like the early 2000s and Tim Ferriss like really rose like to fame, and he made a really good argument in that book that never left me. And he defined eustress versus distress. And so distress is that stress that's placed on you involuntarily, right? Like where it's like, you're living a good, clean, healthy life and you run into tragedy or cancer. That we're not promoting that kind of stress. But this idea of stress, like, hey, I am voluntarily adopting stress and rigor in the name of becoming a better athlete, that kind of eustress. And so when you start to see the first three legs of the stool as stress, and then you think about like cocktails or chemicals and you're just mixing things, you want your proper yin and yang, right? You're like, okay, bam, I just got hit hard. So that all is like backdrop to what I first think of. Now recovery means how do I polarize and come at it from the opposite end of the spectrum so that I might absorb all the work that occurred in that stressful day. So now I got to go crazy, smooth and easy. And my check in my own brain is not how hardcore am I? My check is like, am I balancing out yesterday's work so that I might actually get something from it? It's like a real gentle mindset. You're still probably waking up and being disciplined and like starting when you need to. And like, there's a lot of elements that require discipline to it, but you're still in a mind frame and a physical movement of gentle, easy. When in doubt, I relax even more.
Yep. You got to balance stress with the rest. And in our world, rest is not sitting on your couch. Rest is active in some way. One of the pillars of recovery in general is recovery movement. The other two pillars being fueling, hydration, and sleep. But recovery movement is critical. And as we like to say, motion is lotion, or movement equals blood flow equals healing. You got to create that easy movement to create the blood flow, particularly in the legs, because it doesn't naturally happen there as well if you're stationary. Then that creates blood flow, which helps promote healing of the working muscles, the ones you're using on the hard days, the long day, the medium long day, the quality day. Or the quote that we have that intros this chapter, which, by the way, is chapter, is it 19 or 20 of our book, is a quote from Simone Biles, famous Olympic gold medalist. And I appreciate it because she talks about, in a very rigorous sport of hers, gymnastics, about how some people think of recovery as taking a break or taking a pause from progress, when therein lies the progress. I'm paraphrasing her quote, but therein lies the progress. Taking the break, taking the opportunity to recover actually helps you assimilate the work so that you can get to a higher place. And without it, you don't actually build and grow. Just like we've talked about often, if you're strength training and you're hitting the same muscle group every single day, that's not going to be as effective at building strength as if you're taking breaks, allowing that muscle to heal after you tear it down while lifting so that it can build back stronger. So same concept applies in our world. We recover, and in particular, we use the recovery run so that we can build to a higher place. I think we answered a question in our Friday Q&A this past week. Quick plug for that, 2 p.m. Central on Fridays. We do a little Q&A on Instagram live at Rogue Running if you want to check it out. But we had a question about someone who was trying to structure their routine, and they were talking about doing a long run Saturday, taking Sunday off because they needed that for balancing their week, and then going straight into a medium long run or quality day on Monday. And we were encouraging this person to put a recovery run on Monday instead. If you're not going to be able to run Sunday, fine, but put a recovery run Monday, then switch that quality or medium long to Tuesday in order to have that appropriate balance. And that's what we're talking about here. You got to balance the stress, the hard days with the easy days. So at a minimum, we generally want you to see, well, we'll talk about it more, but place your recovery runs after those stressful days. Let's dig into the why a little bit more. There's kind of 3 reasons why we do recovery runs. And I think it's important to acknowledge all 3 reasons. The first reason is the most important. It's the primary purpose of the day, which is to promote recovery and healing. We've already talked about that. Create blood flow that helps promote healing. But there are 2 other important elements of this. The second is, even on those slow, easy days, you're still building aerobic capacity. You're putting miles in the bank, so to speak. And even though the effort's going to be a lot easier, or your easiest efforts of the week, you're still building aerobic capacity in the recovery run as well. So while the primary benefit is that movement, which creates blood flow, which promotes healing so that you can go do the next long or hard thing, you're still laying foundational aerobic capacity. And while, yes, on long runs or medium long run days, that might be more the primary focus, it's still happening on recovery days. The third benefit, which I think, again, is often forgotten, is that when we stack miles, and when we stack miles in a sustainable way, we also improve form and running economy. And so by running more, simply by doing the act, your body finds ways to be more efficient. And so stacking miles, including these recovery miles, helps improve form and economy so that you can be more efficient when you're running fast as well. So those are 3 benefits. So it's not just the recovery thing that we're talking about here.
And I like that too, because I hope some of the listeners start to see, because we've hit on this a few times in some of these conversations, but it's like, there's multiple things at play a lot of times, but as a coach, you're kind of designating a primary, but it doesn't mean these secondary and tertiary components aren't at play and aren't getting benefit. And I hope the way you just explained that, which I thought was very clear and understandable, it's like, I hope athletes can see that not only in this conversation about the recovery runs, but when they look at a lot that goes on in programming in general, they're able to see that, yeah, you're sometimes getting more than one benefit at once, even if a coach is calling out a single primary driver or purpose or reason behind a workout or a protocol or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and always the primary is the first thing, right? But yes, there's a spillover benefit on all the things. And one of the things we talk about in the book, is this idea that some people will come to us, particularly those newer to our programming, and they'll say, I can't run more than X days per week or I will get injured.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a common thing. People will say, well, when I go to 4 days or when I go to 5 days or when I go to 6 days, I get hurt. So how can I, and oftentimes they'll come in with this preconceived notion that they can't.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get to that 3rd, 4th, or 5th, or 6th day because of their patterns and their history that seems to signal to them that they can't do more than a certain number of days. That's too much work. But the interesting thing when you do it the right way, and we'll talk about the right way as we go through this episode, is that the recovery run becomes the anchor, the grease, the glue, however you want to call it, that essentially enables you to do more running during the week, to run more days without getting hurt. And uncommonly, you'll see with somebody that has that preconceived notion about the number of days they can do, commonly they'll be running the same speed every day, going hard every day, or perhaps doing too many quality days or too many long run days, or mixing in too many other elements without balancing it appropriately with the recovery elements. And so just like you said, you've got the stress, that's the primary thing, and you got to balance that with the yin and the yang of the recovery. People that come in with that preconceived notion typically have that out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Too much stress, not enough active rest. And so if in your head you're someone who thinks you can't do more days a week, then the answer generally lies in the fact that you're not doing your recovery runs appropriately or not doing them at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always an exception out there. And so it's like, I love your choice of that word generally, but I'm not going to go after the exceptions. I'm just going to further affirm that. And like, if you hang around the sport long enough, or you've been coaching, you got even a little bit of an experience, you don't even have to be a super experienced coach, or you're just one of those athletes that really pays attention. You almost don't even get the chance to think before you respond when someone says that, oh, I can't run more than 4 days a week. Your gut almost goes, how are you running though? You're like, you find yourself saying it if you've been paying attention. And again, sometimes I run across athletes that are just, they have no desire to coach. They're just crazy observant and smart, and they take advice from their coaches and remember everything they've been taught. And they too will be like, well, how are you running them? Like, it just like that's your first question. Or if I ever hear, athletes say like, I deal with a lot of shin splints and everything, I'll ask, well, what kind of pace are you running? And usually this is also just as general. One of the most common responses to that is, oh, it'll go down. It'll be self-deprecating, not that fast. Or I'm pretty slow, or I'm not that fast, or I'm not elite. Some kind of disclaimer to the fact that they're not that fast, which lets my brain almost every time I hear that go bang, bang. It's the psyche that's causing them to run too fast. They've never asked the question of, how am I running? Not just how many days, but how many days and how are you running those runs? Because if you change how you're running them, you might be able to run 10 runs in a 7-day period. So not just every day, but even doubles. Like, how do people get there?
Yeah.
You have the same bones and blood and all that.
Yeah. Show me a runner who can't do more than, say, 4 days a week, and or a runner that can't do more than a certain mileage level. And typically you'll be looking at a runner that's not managing their recovery days appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And again, exceptions to every scenario, certainly, but that is something I see time and time again
Mm-hmm.
because for a variety of reasons, the ego, the mythology in your head that you have to run fast to get fast. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it happens. And yet, if you do manage recovery appropriately, then you will be able to stack more days or stack more volume. One thing I do want to comment before we move into the where and the how is this idea of stress and distress that you brought up, which I thought was interesting. And I like the way that was categorized. Stress being something that we're seeking in a way because you apply a little stress, you balance appropriately with rest, you grow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, distress is challenging because it's often out of your control. And I just want to make the point that when you have a mix of both, when you have stress and distress, things that are outside of your control, you still have a total stress load that's important to manage and note. And if it's, if you're just stacking your week with things that are in your control, stress that you're adding with the long run, the quality, the medium long run, and you're balancing that appropriately with recovery, great. But if there's distress that comes in the form of tragedy, work chaos, relationship chaos, whatever it may be, it still affects your total stress load.
Mm-hmm.
And so you still have to recover appropriately from the total load, whether it's in your control or not. And in those times when you have more distress than you have stress that you're seeking, you just need to recognize and manage the fact that you still have to recover from that too.
That's a really good point.
And that recovery can look different, perhaps. Sometimes it's a recovery run.
Mm-hmm.
But usually that means you need to pull back somewhere on the stress that you're adding to the equation intentionally in order to balance the total stress load. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to build fitness during that phase of life. And so that's just something to recognize and acknowledge. When distress is too high, you still have to balance that appropriately, which might mean doing the same number of miles, but maybe you pull out the quality, or maybe you slow down even more on your easy days and your recovery days. Something has to give, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we talk about in our coaching is knowing your pressure release valves. When something gets chaotic that's outside of your control, where can you release pressure from the stress you're adding to the equation so that the body can still manage it all?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably its own podcast, but I did want to acknowledge it. In those times when distress is high, then you have to recover from that too.
Mm-hmm. I like it a lot because we talk about feel and listen to your body so much, and it's never the spirit to leave it vague, but that's part of like, you got to listen to your body and feel it, because it's like even the best coach on earth may not know if you're carrying this stressor in your life like that, so you have to feel it. And if it's something you can share with your coach, great. And if not, then that's fine too, but you got to still pay attention to it.
Yep. All right, let's get into the when and the where of the recovery run now that we've thoroughly covered the why. When and where. Basically, where does it fit within your week? And we've touched on this essentially when talking about the long run, the medium long run, the qualities. The where is basically right after the hard day, or in the sequence, next in the sequence. It doesn't necessarily have to be the next day. Ideally, it would be the next day after a long run or a quality workout. But if you have a day off and then you do it, then that can be okay as well. But basically, you don't want to do another run before a hard run after you've done a long run or a quality. That next run in sequence, whether that's the next day or the day after that, should be a recovery run.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, then you're doing something wrong. And to me, this is one area where it has become so clear through the years as a coach, just kind of watching and observing, not just with athletes I coach, but also myself, is that I find injury pops up in these moments. When someone goes from long run to quality workout without that recovery day in between, or vice versa, quality workout to long run, that's where injuries pop up. Mm-hmm. When you don't get that active rest in between the hard days, then the body breaks. And it's just common that I see it. It's not often when I see it that it's done intentionally, it's somebody that says, "Oh, I'm traveling this weekend, can't do my long run on Saturday, so I had to move it up." And so they move it up, and then they go bang quality, and then long run back-to-back days, and then suddenly the system overloads. And so that's one of the reasons why we always sequence it that way, is that it comes immediately after the longer hard days.
Yeah. I've seen that same pattern too. And yes, it's usually with the people that are the most driven and have the purest of intentions. Like, it's a very innocent mistake. But I was thinking of Charlie Munger has this quote, and I love Charlie Munger quotes. They're good for me. But he talks about inversion sometimes, and he'll just talk about, all right, some people might ask him, like, how do you find the best possible company to ever invest in? And he was like, I don't know how to answer that question. I just ask myself, what are some of the worst things you could possibly do to drive a company into the ground? And I just try to do the opposite. I just, I invert it. And so it's in that same spirit, like, that quote helps me a lot, but not every situation do I have enough information on. And so I can't make a wise call. And so that's kind of fair. Right. But where I'm going with this is I want athletes to take from this, don't make this mistake. Like, even if you can't figure out how do I build the entire ideal program, because, I'm just kind of learning and I'm brand new. I'm like, just don't do the back-to-back stress days. Just start there with like, okay, I know I won't do that, and that'll be a really good guiding principle for the life of their training.
Yeah, and the thing about it is it has to apply always, even when things get moved around. That's one of the things that we talk about, is the sequence has to maintain its order. And where people often get in trouble is when they need to make modifications and or they miss a day and they think about making it up when it doesn't fit. And so then the question becomes, well, if I can make it up without messing up the sequence of work, fine, that can be okay. But if I can't make it up without messing the sequence of work, then I need to skip it and maintain the integrity of the sequence, because no one run, workout, long run matters in the grand scheme of things. As we know, it's the body of work that matters. And so would you rather be healthy on the start line, having missed a day, or injured and can't make the start line because you squeezed that extra day in? And so we've got to maintain that integrity, which then means that, recovery days could fall anywhere during your week. It's more about, where you put those three anchors we talked about in last episode. You've got your long run, your quality, and your medium long run. Those are kind of the pillars, the three legs of the stool, so to speak. And basically you're sliding your recovery days at a minimum after long run and quality days. But we also like, if you're doing 6 days a week, to throw another easy run after the medium long run as well. And as long as you've got that sequence, hard day, easy day, hard day, easy day, then you're golden. And then don't mess with it. And if you have to shift it around, maintain the sequence.
Yeah. I kind of thought of I'm with you on that one, but my brain went to another question almost. So
okay, we'll ask it.
Well, okay. So I was kind of thinking of the two ends of the spectrum here, because I'm 100% with you on the spacing. And in the sense that I don't have more to add, I think you said it pretty well. And then I was thinking about, I feel like there's two extremes that sit in the middle of it. So beyond spacing, it's, I guess, back to the how you do it. But there's either people who take the zero, so they're not getting the blood flow. So they either lean that way, they just take it 100% off, or those that run too fast. And I was just curious if you've seen that split and why you think people gravitate to those two ends.
Interesting. So yeah, the two ends of the spectrum, the person who thinks doing nothing is better, and then the person that's overeager and does too much. And, we have a lot of those folks. Why does it happen? I think it's for different reasons. I think every person who might fall in one of those two buckets might have a different reason for it. On the one end of the spectrum, the person who's skipping the recovery day because they're not running, for that person, I think it's a mix of things. I think on one or one element of it is that, especially in American culture, we've been taught that doing nothing is recovery, that sitting on your ass is recovery. And it's just flat out wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going for a walk is better than sitting on your ass as it relates to recovery for running. And look, there's a time and place to sit on your ass. I'm not saying don't do that ever, but it has to come in the context of, but that's not recovery in the context of how we talk about it. So I think, so there's some mythology around it where, especially in American culture, this idea of sitting and doing nothing is recovery. But when you're sitting, you're not creating movement, you're not creating blood flow. And therefore you're not actually healing as well as if you were just to go on a walk, for example. I also think sleep is active. You know, you have to go to sleep. You have to make time for it in your schedule. Fueling, hydration, those are active things that you have to do. Just sitting and doing nothing is not an active recovery. So I think there's some American mythology around it. I also think there's this perception of kind of time where people say, well, I don't have time for that. You know, I'm already doing all this other running. And so they tend to retreat from the full program to just the things that seem important. Well, long run's important, quality workout's important. Maybe they didn't know it, but medium long run's important. So they're hitting those highlights, so to speak, and then missing the days in between because they don't view them as important or as important. And, you know, as we know, and as we've talked about, recovery is where you actually build fitness. So you have to balance the two. And, you know, I think we've done a good job of dispelling the kind of mythology around both of those things over the last several weeks. So those are a couple of things. And then on the other side of it, the person who's always going too fast, I think that is often driven by ego, where they're thinking, well, you know, I want to, maybe ego for some, and maybe it's just being kind of type A and aggressive for others, where they're trying to be the A student, you know, and they think, well, if I can go out and run, great, but if I can go out and run faster, even isn't that better? And so they just let that feed them. It's kind of interesting. I've had a handful of people recently, and they'll probably know who I'm talking about, who are already doing, say, 6 days a week of running and a bunch of miles, you know, 50, 60 plus miles. And then they want to find ways to add more, even more. And so they'll do a bike ride, or they'll do a swim on top of that on their 7th day, which, you know, we tend to recommend a day completely off in our programming, but, you know, they want to add something on that off day, which, you know, might sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but oftentimes when I see that happen, I see it as an example of the person who's trying to do too much, and that extra thing that is intended maybe in their head to be a recovery thing then becomes a stressor. And so sometimes you have to hold people back from themselves and say, no. Like that swim went from being a casual swim, which might be fine if managed appropriately, to becoming a workout in and of itself. And if you're doing that, or that bike ride is a spin class where you're dancing on your bike to the music, like, okay, well, no, I think we've not followed the recovery principles. We've added another stressor. And so anyway, so I see that happen on occasion, and especially lately, where you kind of have to protect people from their own eagerness.
Yeah.
So
both well said. And I felt value in asking it, because I think sometimes if people hear their pattern, you know, sort of articulated, and those were the first things that came to your mind, I think, you know, I hope they can go like, oh, okay, I'm doing that. And I'm not alone, which usually is an encouraging thing, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not a unique snowflake. Like, yeah, that happens quite a lot, and I know how to fix it now. I can check in on it, become aware, and make the adjustment. Like there's a value to someone articulating kind of your experience for you.
Yeah. And I also don't think, I mean, again, when we talk about those examples, I want to be clear that I'm not throwing stones or being negative about those personality types or those people that are responding in their different ways, because that's just human nature. It's who we are. And so we're all learning. We're in a process of growing. And so it's more just, these are patterns that we recognize that maybe you might recognize in yourself that you can then hopefully avoid. And going back to the kind of first part of that, the person who might be skipping the recovery day, one of the reasons I think that happens that I didn't mention that I want to come back to, because I think it's important, because how many people, especially newer rogue athletes, do you have that'll be doing the Wednesday workout with you, doing the long run, and then that's it?
Yeah.
So that happens, right? And I think for the new athlete, it happens because they come, they're getting into it, they're building, they're excited, they're eager. They do a hard workout on a Wednesday. The next day they're sore and they're tired. And they're like, oh man, I can't run, or I shouldn't run because I'm sore and tired. And so that becomes a cue in their mind that they should be actually taken off because of that soreness and tired, because of the eagerness from the day before. And one of the things I want to remind people is that rather than that being a cue to take the next day off, or they come and do a long run and they go a little further than they've ever gone before because they're excited. Next day, they're really sore on Sunday. The cue there isn't to take the day off. It is to say, oh, I'm sore. I actually need this easy movement to create the blood flow to promote the healing. And when I'm sore because I worked hard on Wednesday or Saturday, then that might mean that my recovery run is even easier than normal, or I even start by walking the recovery run to build into it. But it should be a cue when you're sore that you need that active movement, that active rest, rather than the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like, I guess, education, like they just didn't know. And those are sometimes the fun ones, because then hopefully if they're listening and we've explained it, they'll start incorporating it.
Yeah. And again, I think that's more of an American mentality of, oh, I'm sore, I should take a day off. Like, no, you're sore, you need to move. So move.
Yeah.
All right. So
but move gently.
Yeah, but move gently. And that's where the perfect segue for the how. We covered the when and the where. Now let's talk about the how. We're talking about how fast. We're going to talk about terrain, and we're going to talk about what this might mean for your footwear on recovery days. And I think we're going to touch on some things here that at least I think are a little bit counterintuitive. So hopefully we'll wake up some thoughts in your brain that you might not expect. First, this one's probably the most straightforward. How fast for recovery runs? So what do you usually tell people there? Or maybe we should say how easy or how slow.
Yeah. I was going to say, if power walkers are passing you, which is actually misleading because there's some really fast power walkers. I actually still use the terminology glacially slow, which we also have in the book. And it's just been a rogue term, I think, for a long dang time. So it just comes out of my mouth. But I was kind of laughing, thinking about preparation for this, because last week we talked about how sometimes we get pegged as only talking about running slow. Right. And I was like, what we're going to talk about this week is running even slower. That's the way I want to answer that question. Slower than we've talked about thus far.
Yeah. And when you think you're going slow enough, slow down some more.
Yeah.
It's sort of how we think about it. But yeah, I like that you brought up the term glacially slow. You know, Ruth gets the credit for kind of introducing that vernacular into the rogue vocabulary. Glacially slow meaning you're moving, but it's slow as a glacier. You know, maybe won't feel like you're moving very fast, but that's how it should be. I mean, on these recovery days, when you're sore, when you're tired from the day before, especially those early miles, and you might build into the run a little bit as the body warms into it, but they should be glacially slow. I'll reframe that slightly, painfully slow. You know, because some people will say, well, I can't go that slow. Sure you can. You just need to force yourself and set that ego aside. So glacially slow. So those are some ways to describe it. It should be, I mean, again, I'll go back to it, painfully slow, awkwardly slow, you know, would be another way to put it, at least when you're learning how to do it appropriately. from a pace perspective, there are rules of thumb we use here, which I'm going to give you, but then I'm also going to make sure you understand that there's a huge range at which you should be thinking about these target paces. But typically we'll say a recovery run should be at least 2 minutes slower than marathon pace, at least 2.5 minutes slower than half marathon pace. But, and that there's nothing wrong with those rules if someone's paying attention to them and listening appropriately. But I want you to understand that that's the fast end of the range. And I don't want you trying to be on the fast end of the range. There's a huge range beyond that is also okay. So think about it as 2 to 4 minutes slower than marathon pace is probably the appropriate range. Some days you're going to need to be in that 3 to 4 minutes slower if you've had a hard long run or a hard quality workout. And so we're talking about a big range, or 2.5 to 4.5 minutes slower than marathon pace. And to kind of put a finer point on this with a real life example, one of the things after Sebastian Sawe set the world record, first official world record under 2 hours for the men, which was done in London, they put out information about his training. One of the things you see, he's doing a lot of miles per week. So that kind of validates miles matter. But you'll also see that he does some of his runs at 9:30 per mile. Now keep in mind, his marathon pace is close to 4:30 per mile. So we're talking about 5 minutes per mile slower on those recovery days. Now for him, it's more of a recovery session. It'll be a second session on a day. So he might have a quality workout in the morning and then do an evening run in order to get that total mileage. And that evening run becomes his next run in the sequence, which is his recovery day or recovery run. And he's doing it at 9:30 per mile. Marathon pace close to 4:30 per mile. So that is just one example. And people say, whoa. We can't talk about that as if, you go slow to go fast. The 9:30 is not enabling the 4:30. Correct. The 9:30 is not enabling the 4:30 directly in that it's not an input that's creating 4:30 as an output. But 4:30 is the input, and we need the 9:30 to be able to come back to 4:30 and to assimilate the training that's going to get you to racing 4:30 in a marathon. And so they are symbiotically related, but people sometimes lose the plot on that. But that's just a real life example to underscore how glacially slow for him. I mean, just imagine what a 9:30 looks like for somebody who can run 4:30.
It's wild. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
For me, I'm 6:20 marathoner, so that would put me at 11:20. And look, I'm telling you, there's recovery runs where I'm running 11:20 because that's what the body asked for, or because I go do a slow day on the Greenbelt. And sometimes those days will be 12, 13-minute miles. Movement, blood flow, healing, glacially slow, check. So that's the answer to how fast, really how slow.
Yeah. And if people flip that to percentages, I think it'd really shock them. If they look at the percentage slowdown. But I'm glad you brought this up, because I was going to say, I do think the one of the top reasons that people are afraid to slow down, let's say, quote, too much on an easy day or a recovery day. They're like, okay, I get polarization, so I'm slowing down like 60 seconds. I got it. Look, it's a minute different. That's huge. That's connected to ego and insecurities and mental constructs and all of that, because when you see a pro running an 8-minute mile, a lot of people in the ether are still going to think, but 8's still pretty respectable. So if my marathon pace is 9, I don't want to do the percentage slowdown, because the truth would reveal something I don't like, or it's like that lets us know you're still worried about how it looks, right? As opposed to just, hey, what's the purpose? Well, it's that blood flow, so I can heal, so I can nurture.
And what that will mean for some people, really across the spectrum of paces, is that a recovery day might occasionally be a fast walk. I'll just say it. Fast walking creates movement, which promotes blood flow, which promotes healing. And that might be what you need on a given day in order for it all to hang together. So, the common question I get here is, well, I can't go that slow. I can't make myself go that slow. And the answer is yes, you can. You have to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we have to practice running faster, we have to practice running slower. And I talk about this in episode 306 of the podcast, where I talk about the why behind running slow, or some of the reasons why you run slow. But one of the reasons, and I'm a firm believer in this, even though you don't hear it a lot, is when you unlock efficiency and smoothness and rhythm at any pace, then you unlock it at all the other paces as well. So we tend to be more efficient when we run faster. That's the way our body works. When we run slow, we tend to be less efficient. And so I think everybody who's listening, part of their pursuit should be efficiency running easy.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that will then do is unlock even more efficiency running fast.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're inefficient running easy, that means there's inefficiency throughout your pace spectrum that you're not picking up on because it gets masked by the smoothness that comes with running faster. So remember, slowing down isn't just about recovery, as we talked about. It's about form and economy, as we talked about at the top. And part of that is being efficient at all paces.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be efficient at all paces, then you're going to be more efficient at all paces,
Mm-hmm.
which might mean taking that awkward 10, 11, 12-minute mile and turning it into a smooth 10, 11, 12-minute mile that you can then pull out of the back pocket and say, all right, I need to play the 12-minute mile card today because that's what my body's calling for recovery. Or it could be 13 or 14 or 15, or it could be that fast walk that I was talking about. Whatever that looks like for you, don't be afraid to play that card and become good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you practice that? Well, you practice it by measuring and enforcing it. So, what I'll tell people, especially when I coach one-on-one, is I'll say, all right, I want you to target certain times on your recovery run. If you're struggling running, and I'm just going to pick a pace, 10-minute miles to do easy math, and you've got a 5-mile recovery run, I want you to do that recovery run in 50 minutes. Target that time.
Mm-hmm.
Force yourself to do it. And yes, it'll feel weird and awkward and a little bit clumsy initially, but it will become more efficient. And then guess what? We unlock efficiency elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great point. I was thinking the word, when they say I can't do it, they're just simply unfamiliar with it. Like it's taken them out of their norms, for most people. Because we know that in a race, when we blow up and we hit the struggle bus, but we're fighting for a little bit more, our pace is now 90 seconds slower than planned. We find out in that moment, oh, I actually can run 90 seconds slower than what I was targeting, or I've blown up by even more than that. I was just trying to give a fairly common example. So one, we know that it's actually possible. So I never buy I can't. I just am like, okay, I got to figure out where they're coming from because they're using something I don't believe. And I just genuinely don't believe it. Something more, I think, understandable is you're completely unfamiliar with it, potentially don't know the benefits of it, and that efficiency gain and form across the spectrum, and the need for it, I think, is probably the knowledge gap that they had. Like I'll give someone the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know there was value there, but it doesn't mean they get to skip practicing it. Right. And my practice in quote the how is, I remind people to throw their shoulders back and then lean with their belly button in the belly button specifically. So they don't hinge at the waist, just poke, shoulders are back, that belly button leans. And so I like that you said it may need to be a walk. Start it with a walk. Shoulders back, lean with that belly button. And as soon as you feel that slight shift in the feet, like I'm jogging now as opposed to walking, that's when you just rest in that pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter. Yeah. And it's a smooth, glacially slow recovery run.
Those are good cues. The other one I like to use is when somebody tells me they can't run that slow, I'll say, well, can you run in place?
I could do anything. Look at me.
And then often they'll say, yeah, I can run in place. I'll say, okay, we'll start by running in place and then give that slight forward lean. And you're going to find
That's good.
You're going to find it.
Got him.
But one thing I do want to call out here, because the naysayers will say, well, if I plod or if I go that slow, I'm going to become slower. And the answer is yes. If that's all you ever do, you're going to reinforce that pattern and never come out of it. But again, the reason why we're talking about running that slow is because of the stress that you created on the fast day or the long day. And so, yes, if you're only running super easy recovery runs and that's all you're ever doing, then that will reinforce staying in that pace range. But if you're doing it the right way and you're polarizing, as we talk about, then those slow, easy recovery days will then support your ability to go faster on the quality days and to put more into your long run workouts so that you build. And I, truly didn't embrace this mentality or understand it fully until my wife was pregnant with our first. I was training for a marathon and she ran, I think, until about a week before he was born. And so I would do my recovery days with her, and it started out, and she was a marathoner, obviously previously. Started out, at whatever pace, call it 10-minute miles with her on those days. And then by the time we were later in her pregnancy, she's shuffling 15, 16-minute miles. And I would just do it. And then in that moment, I realized, because then I would getting so much more out of my quality workouts, feeling better on my long runs. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't realize how slow you could go and then see the benefits still. And so that's a real life example of it kind of coming to life. So those that are skeptical, I would encourage you to lean into it and just see what happens. Because you'll find that it unlocks things on quality days and feeling better on long days in ways that you just can't really understand until you do it.
What's cool on that piece there is that it might take a whole season of trust before someone gets the result on race day and then is like, now I'm married to it forever. But what's cool is if someone is skeptical but open to the idea a little bit, you can start to get some pretty quick feedback. Not immediate, but it's like you'll get small in week 1 if you're highly attuned to your body. But in like 2 to 3, maybe max 4 weeks, you should already start to see yourself feeling so much stronger in qualities. Like you can actually start to feel that and sense that and be attuned to that pretty quickly. You'll get that biofeedback pretty quickly if they were to even just give it a 1 month final experiment for 1 month.
Yep. Play with it.
Yeah.
Experiment with it. See what happens. Challenge yourself to embrace the truly slow recovery run. All right, 2 questions here as we wrap. One is, what terrain should I be running my recovery runs on? 2, what kind of footwear? And, we're going to talk about some things that might surprise people, I think, in these 2 categories that might be a little bit counterintuitive. But I also want to make sure that as we talk about it, we kind of talk about it holistically. I think most people would think when we're talking about a recovery run that those runs should only be on flat, easy terrain. And while there is certainly a time and a place for a flat, easy recovery run, we're not the ones that are necessarily saying that's the only way your recovery runs should look. Personally, I don't mind some hills on a recovery day. If, and the if is big, you keep the effort appropriate on those hills. So for example, I like a good hilly recovery run in my neighborhood, and there's some hills where I'll just walk the hill and then get back into that glacially slow jog. So you have to approach it with that mentality. Or I like to play games with myself where I will try to run up a hill as easy as I can, keeping my heart rate low. And that's a fun way to work on hill mechanics in a way that kind of gamifies the recovery run. So hills are okay and sometimes even preferred on recovery days because they allow you to use a lot of different muscle groups. When we're running flat, we tend to use the same muscle groups. When we're running on terrain up and down, we use more muscle groups. So it's a more holistic kind of blood flow healing experience if and the if is big, you maintain the effort at an easy effort or glacially slow rhythm. And on the hilly parts, that might mean walking. So I don't know where to go from there except to say, but also remember, it's okay to occasionally just do a flat one too, if that's what that's what your gut's telling you, if that's what your mind needs. If you had a really hilly long run, you're like, man, I just need some flat terrain so I can turn my brain off and shuffle. I'm okay with that too. But just think about introducing perhaps a little bit of variety where appropriate in your recovery terrain.
Yeah. Flat terrain is totally great. Like, it's fine. But like, I think the spirit here is just to say there's also benefit from getting off of that. And I like trail too, because it gives, there's two pieces why I like trail. One is that because like, I feel as though road runners, generally speaking, again, few generalizations today, but the vast majority of road runners, when they are on the trail, that whole ego piece we talked about that kind of gets in there, it just disappears because whether it's conscious or subconscious, and I think for most it's subconscious, it's just there is no point of comparison. Therefore, there is no good or bad on the day. It's only they go binary. Did I do it? Did I not?
Right.
And in that case, I think that that's good. And then two, like you said, like we're interacting with the ground differently. It's changing it up. Some hill, maybe some rocks here and there. Like, and that allows, if you remember what you're up to on this day, like you're taking care of yourself, you're trying to be gentle, you're bringing blood flow with nutrients so that you both heal and nurture from the stress the day before. If you're keeping that top of mind and you know what you're up to, then you're on the trail. It's cool because you do get immediate biofeedback there where you're like, okay, a little bit lower right back, felt a little, like nothing pain. If it is super painful, obviously listen to it. But I'm not saying this in a scary way. It's almost like I can take inventory of like, yeah, a slight weird bone thing on the left knee. We'll pay attention to that this coming up week. And then surgery foot, feel that nerve shoot fire thingy under my second toe. It's like, oh, okay. Like you're just sort of filing away in your own mind. Like, oh, okay, I know my little sensitive areas that are talking to me today on the recovery run from this past weeks of pushing and everything. It's just a good way to get some good insight on yourself because you are moving differently on the trail instead of that same exact pattern.
Trail, a little bit of up and down, some hills. Variety, I think, is if we were to summarize, what kind of terrain am I looking for on a recovery day? And this isn't necessarily variety within the day itself, but across days, across recovery days, find some variety, mix it up. I think the mixing it up part also gives you that mental break, whether it be trail or a new route, you getting that kind of curiosity out, doing something different gives you that mental break from that same route you're always doing. As you said, also kind of breaks you out of whatever patterns you may have created already in that one little route you like, so that you're forced, without ego to really slow things down and embrace it. So variety, seek variety on your recovery days, keeping in mind the effort we're trying to achieve. And if you need to walk, always, that's okay. And again, we're not talking about doing hill repeats or finding the most challenging route out there. We're just talking about, mixing it up a little bit to create that dynamic recovery, both physically and mentally. So that's the terrain point. The last point on footwear is, I think, another one where we kind of get to some counterintuitive things. Some people, I think, have this idea in their mind that on their recovery days, they should be using their cushiest, squishiest shoe. And there might be a time and a place for that. But here is another area where we would preach variety, which might mean that, some days you're wearing that squishy shoe. I personally like to use a lighter, leaner shoe on recovery days. Why? It forces me to slow down. It also forces me to stay really in tune with my form so that I'm not plodding along. So I'm staying light on my feet. And that requires actually on a recovery day, a lot of mental engagement, but it kind of is a forcing mechanism, at least for me personally, with that when I'm in a lighter, leaner shoe, to maintain a slow pace, to keep my cadence up, to keep my form in check, to stay light on my feet, rather than if I'm in a squishy, thick shoe, then I can be a little lazy, a little sloppy with all of those things. And again, there's a time and a place for that, but I would encourage you to consider variety in your footwear on recovery days as well. Mix it up. Choose a few different things from your quiver from one day, recovery day, to the next. And this is a place where I'll remind people that really the only definitive science on running shoes and injury prevention isn't that if you run in a certain type of shoe, cushion, stability, neutral, whatever, that you'll be less likely to get injured, but rather you're less likely to get injured when you wear a variety of shoes, when you mix it up. So when you get a slightly different stimulus, so you don't get stuck in a rut with wearing the same shoe every day. And so we'll just remind you that on recovery days, seek some of that variety as well and play with it and see what you like. This is where, I like to have at least 2 shoes that you can balance between. But if you're me, I've got 5. So I might pull any one of those 5 out of the quiver to use on a recovery day, depending on what kind of stimulus I'm looking for.
Yeah. I like it under the bucket of, again, just information. Like it allows you to get more information on yourself. And so that's why, in theory, you would want a little bit of lighter shoe. And I'm not trying to get off the variety. They can switch it up. Variety is still the point that you're making, but I'm also saying it when you go that lighter route that you said you prefer, it just makes so much sense because it allows you to get the feedback. It's not unlike, like NSAIDs on race day. I don't mind if an athlete uses some kind of pain meds, over the counter, but in training, never. I'm like, never would I ever recommend it because I don't want you to not be able to feel it and therefore push past it and hurt yourself. On race day, fine. I'm open to that. Same thing. It's like, I don't want to add any protection that ends up preventing me from seeing what I need to see. That's, I think, the key, reason behind that. Like, you want that insight on yourself. So yeah. Don't be afraid to use a lighter shoe and know, okay, there it is. I feel it. With, of course, the caveat that the effort stays easy.
Yes. Don't use that as an excuse to, I screwed up. I went fast because I was in my faster shoes. No, this is not the excuse that you want. This is the reminder to keep it easy no matter what. But variety in terrain and footwear, also going to be beneficial on recovery days, provided we keep the effort dialed in as super easy. So there you go. So one thing I would just want people to think about going into this next week, if they listen to this episode, is how can I take at least one of my recovery runs and slow it down even more? Add a minute per mile. You've got nothing to lose. Trust me. You're not going to go too slow. I promise. What if you added a minute per mile to your normal recovery pace? Just do it for a week or 2 weeks. See how you feel then on the next day, and then on your next quality day and your long run day. Just plus 1 minute per mile, track it, measure it, be proud of it on Strava, post it with pride. Because if you can just commit to that, we believe, and I think you'll prove to yourself, that will unlock things for the days that, quote, really matter, the 3 legs of the stool that really matter. It will unlock things on those days that you hadn't seen before. So there you go. The challenge for this week, plus 1 minute per mile on the recovery days. And if you do it, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Drop it in a YouTube comment. Come on our Friday Q&A and let us know about it. We'd love to hear some real life experience from truly embracing the recovery run. All right. That's it. That's a wrap on this episode. We'll remind you of a couple of things before we shut it down. 2 p.m. Friday Central Time at Rogue Running Instagram Live. Come with your questions if you have them about this topic or about your training or Happy to answer questions of all varieties there. Secondly, reminder that we've got a lot of training starting for fall races from October to December. So this is a good time to join us, whether you can join us in person in the Dallas area or Austin area, or if you can join us virtually in one of our virtual training groups or virtual one-on-one if that's preferred. And then finally, check us out on our website, roguerunning.com, or on Instagram at roguerunning if you want to learn more about us. You can also email us, coaching@roguerunning.com, if you have questions. So there you go. We'll wrap it here, sending you off on those nice and easy recovery runs, and we'll talk to you next week.